excellent point. I just wanted to also, it was a good segue to the cultural differences between, let's keep it easy and say US versus Scandinavia. But I also think you can put Europe in the same bucket, right? It's not that different. Can you tell us the good sides of being in US? Obviously, you get a lot more ambitious. You are surrounded by people that really want you to excel. And there's a bit of a difference if you go the same route in Norway. How's that experience been? Because you have friends in Norway, you have worked for a Norwegian company. How do you size them up, those two differences?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I would say, I mean, if we take one step back, I think my childhood dream of living in New York was sort of based on an illusion, right? My illusion of New York or the US, I would say. Growing up in Norway, we are very exposed to US culture, whether it's pop culture, whether it's sports, politics. I remember Johan Golden, he during the 2020 primary, elections, he was making a joke on television that why is it that Norwegians know the name of all the 25 candidates running for the Democratic ticket, and we don't know the name of our, Secretary of Fisheries and Agriculture, which is so true. And so I think this Turkish author, that's my favorite author, and I quote her a lot when she says this, Elif Shafak, she says, we live in an information society, but I think people have to distinguish between information, knowledge, and wisdom. So I think when you have information about something, you think that you have knowledge about it, but knowledge actually for information to become knowledge, you have to have a reflection, you have to build notes, you have to have experiences around it. You have to let that sort of the information you have kind of foster a little bit, right? And then it becomes knowledge. And then eventually, maybe with age or more experiences or further reflection, it becomes wisdom. So I think I would say that before I moved to the US, I had an image of the US being, I had information about US, not knowledge about the US, and I think that's, where I want to go with this. So I would say if I compare it to Scandinavia or Western societies or Europe in general, I would say that the US is not a Western nation. And I might get in trouble for saying that. So the US is a Western nation, New York, urban areas, the California. But I think in terms of overall, the US is a very traditional society, traditional in sense of gender roles, traditional in sense of class. I mean, Isabel Wilkinson last year came out with this book called Caste, and when you hear the word caste, you think of Indian society. And she says, the US has a caste system. And the difference between maybe a caste system in India and a caste system in the US is that skin color is, mixed into it, right? So if you go into a building in New York City, an office building, when you go into the reception to check in, most likely the person working behind the counter is either Hispanic or, or Latinx or Black. And then the further you go up the building in the nicer, more and more nicer parts of the building or higher up, the more you're going to just end up just seeing more and more white people and less people of color, right? So I would say that kind of a misunderstanding I had about the US is that it is a Western society. I think in many ways it's not. And I think one thing that's really fascinating is Americans have everything they want and very few of the things they need, right? So you have 200 different versions of breakfast cereals, but they don't have access to universal healthcare. And I think that's or free higher education, right? And I think that's a thing that I think us as Scandinavians sort of tend to underestimate about US culture. I would also say, I would definitely say that I would compare the US more to India in the sense that you have this social kind of inequality, but then you have that hustle mentality, right? And I would compare that way more to Indian culture than I would to Norwegian culture, and as you're referring to. So I think even though you see statistically that upward mobility in the US is going down, you still have individuals who truly believe in their own, picking this, what do you call it? Pulling themselves up from the bootstraps. Like that's definitely something that's very apparent in the US still. And that kind of belief in your own, your own ability to become successful. And you don't have any. I think in Norway we have the privilege of trusting our government to help us. In cultures such as the US and in India, you would say you don't have any trust in the government to solve any of your problems. So either you can lean on yourself, or you lean on your family or people around you or your community, but you don't trust the government to solve any of your problems, but in Norway we tend to do that, right?
It's very interesting. I mean, this is going to be very simplified, but I think just looking at it from the outside and having some experience, it seems like sort of the A players are better off building stuff in US, while if you're a C player or want a more normal lifestyle, you're way better off being in Norway, right? So it sort of depends, and it's contextual as well, right?
Oh, 100%. I think it's very winner take all society. And I think it's winner take all in the sense that if you're born into a privileged family in the US, you're going to continue. You have to really mess up in order to not be successful, right? But if you are born into a poor family in the US, the odds are really stacked against you. And as an outsider, you can really witness that. But I mean, I'm not going to rain on anyone's parade, right? I'm going to say, I love the energy that people have and the pride that they bring in their line of work, whether it is the shoe salesman or the CEO. So, but I agree, being mediocre, if you're mediocre, move to Norway and you'll be fine either way. And I think maybe that's why there isn't that kind of drive here, right? Because you can do well regardless. And I think also Norwegians tend to take a lot of our opportunities for granted, unfortunately.